October 27, 1962. 200 feet below the surface of the Atlantic Ocean, a Soviet submarine. 78 men. No contact with Moscow for days. The captain has just given the order to arm the nuclear torpedo. 2 of the 3 senior officers on board have said yes. 1 man has not. He is not the captain. He holds no more formal authority than the 2 men who just voted to end the world. What he holds is something harder to name. And in the next 4 minutes, the decision he makes will determine whether the Cuban Missile Crisis becomes the last thing humanity ever argues about. His name is Vasily Arkhipov, and almost no one has ever heard of him. This is Legacy Latitude. Here is what the world knows about the Cuban Missile Crisis. 13 days in October 1962. Kennedy and Khrushchev. 2 superpowers staring at each other across 90 miles of ocean. The closest humanity has ever come to nuclear war. Here is what the world does not know. While Kennedy and Khrushchev were negotiating above the surface, the most dangerous moment of the entire crisis was happening 200 feet underneath it. Inside Soviet submarine, B-59. The submarine had been underwater for days. No sunlight, no contact with Moscow. The crew could not receive radio signals at that depth, which meant they had no idea what was happening above them. No idea that negotiations were underway. No idea that the 2 most powerful men in the world were trying to find a way back from the edge. All they knew was that American destroyers were dropping explosives around them. The temperature inside the submarine had reached 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Carbon dioxide levels were rising. 78 men were running out of breathable air. And the captain had just decided, enough. He believed war had already started. He believed they were under attack, and he was not going to let his crew die in the dark at the bottom of the ocean without firing back. So he gave the order. Arm the nuclear torpedo. 2 of the 3 senior officers agreed. The 3rd one did not. That man was Vasily Arkhipov. And what he did next, and why he was able to do it, is the first quality that separates the leaders that history remembers from the ones who simply held the title. Vasily Arkhipov was not the captain of B-59. He was the chief of staff of the entire submarine flotilla, which meant that on this particular vessel, his authorization was required alongside the captain and the political officer before any nuclear weapon could be launched. 3 signatures, not 2. That single procedural fact is the only reason this story exists. Because on every other Soviet submarine in that flotilla, the captain and the political officer alone could authorize a launch. 2 men. And on those submarines, both men were ready to fire. On B-59, there was a 3rd man in the room. Captain Valentin Savitsky had reached his limit. Days without sleep. 120-degree heat. Men collapsing from carbon dioxide poisoning around him. No word from Moscow. Explosions outside the hull. He believed the war had started without him. He reportedly said, "Maybe the war has already started up there while we are down here. We will die, but we will sink them all. We will not disgrace our Navy." The political officer agreed. Arkhipov did not. What followed was an argument, in a steel tube 200 feet underwater, with 78 men listening, with a nuclear torpedo loaded and ready. 1 man, against the 2 men who outranked him on that vessel. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He reasoned. He made the case, calmly, clearly, and without apology, that this was not the moment to act, that surfacing and awaiting orders was the right decision, that the cost of being wrong about this particular choice was not something any of them could afford to get wrong. Captain Savitsky listened. He gave the order to surface. B-59 emerged from the Atlantic Ocean surrounded by American warships and helicopters, flying the Soviet flag, demanding that the harassment stop. The crew was gaunt, exhausted, barely functional, but alive, and so was everyone else. Here is the question that matters, not what Arkhipov did, but why he was able to do it. Because standing alone in a room where everyone else has decided is not a personality trait. It is not something you either have or you do not. It is something that gets built, quietly, over time, in circumstances that have nothing to do with the moment it is finally needed. A year before the Cuban Missile Crisis, Vasily Arkhipov was serving aboard a different Soviet submarine. a nuclear submarine called K-19. In July 1961, K-19's reactor coolant system failed in the North Atlantic. The crew faced a catastrophic nuclear meltdown. 8 engineers were sent in without adequate protection to manually repair the reactor. All 8 died within weeks from radiation exposure. Arkhipov was there. He helped manage the crisis. He watched those men die. He came home carrying something most people never carry: the knowledge of what it costs when the wrong decision gets made under pressure. That knowledge did not make him fearless in October 1962. It made him clear. There is a difference. Fearless means you do not feel the weight of the moment. Clear means you feel all of it, and you speak anyway. When Captain Savitsky gave the order to arm the torpedo, Arkhipov did not hesitate because he was brave. He spoke because he knew, with the absolute certainty of a man who had already lived through what happens when catastrophic decisions get made in moments of panic, that this was not the right call. His voice in that room was not loud. It was not emotional. It was just certain. And certainty earned over years of real experience is the hardest thing to argue with. That is the first quality of a great leader. Not the loudest voice in the room, not the highest title, not the most confidence. The courage to use your voice when you genuinely know, that the room is wrong. And the credibility to back it up. Because here is what nobody tells you about leadership. The moment your voice matters most. The moment the room needs to hear what you know. That moment does not wait for you to be ready. It does not announce itself. It does not give you time to build your case. It just arrives. And when it does, the only thing standing between your voice and your silence is everything you built before anyone was watching. Arkhipov built his in the reactor room of K-19 in 1961. You are building yours right now. Every week on Legacy Latitude, we find the one moment in a documented life that contains the whole lesson. Not the highlight reel, the mechanism underneath it. The thing that actually explains how someone found the clarity to act when it mattered most. The thing you can carry out of this episode and into your own life today. Because the figures we study here are not here to impress you. They are here to show you something true about what human beings are capable of, including you. Next week, we go deeper into the anatomy of what makes a great leader. The second quality has nothing to do with authority, and everything to do with what you do with the people around you. Thomas Blanton, director of the United States National Security Archive, said this about Vasily Arkhipov in 2002. A guy called Vasily Arkhipov saved the world. Not a president, not a general, not the man with the highest rank or the loudest voice or the most decorated career. A man who said no, in a room where everyone else had said yes. He did not save the world because he was fearless. He saved it because he was clear. Because he had spent years building the kind of credibility that gives a voice weight when weight is needed most. He went home after that. He never sought recognition. He never told the story publicly for 35 years. He just knew what he knew. He said what he had to say. And then he went back to living his life. Vasily Arkhipov died in 1998. The world only learned his full story years after he was gone. He never knew he would be called the man who saved the world. He was just the man who spoke up when it mattered. Here is what I want to leave you with today. There is a room somewhere in your life where you already know the answer, where you can see what others cannot see or will not say, where the easy thing is to stay quiet and let the moment pass. Arkhipov did not save the world by being extraordinary. He saved it by being unwilling to stay silent when he knew the room was wrong. That is not a gift. That is a choice. And it is available to you. Sit with that. I will see you in the next one. New episodes every week on YouTube and Spotify. Find us at Legacy Latitude.